Maruti's Vitara Brezza needs absolutely no introduction. It's become the go-to choice if you need a compact SUV. That upright stance, the high seating position and its fun to drive nature is hard to say no to. But to challenge the status quo, we've got this, the Honda WR-V. Now the WR-V isn't an outright compact SUV, but Honda have done just enough to lend it that tough appeal. What we are here to find out is if the WR-V has what it takes to lure you away from the go-to choice. Design-wise, there's no denying these two cars here are as different as chalk and cheese. The WR-V tries hard to hide its jazz roots. Yes, the wheelbase is longer by 25mm, but that isn't something you notice at first glance. Naturally, the similarities to the hatchback are quite obvious when you view it from the side or the rear. But bits like the new face with the big chrome grille, the LED daytime running lamps, the 16-inch alloy wheels and the cladding do enough to make it look rugged. On the other hand, the Brezza looks butch from the word go. The styling isn't extraordinary, but the square shape and elements such as the projector headlamps, dual-tone paint scheme and the gunmetal grey 16-inch alloys work well together to give it a mini SUV look. As far as size goes, both are nearly identical in terms of length, but the Brezza is a lot taller and a lot wider compared to the WR-V. It also sits higher off the ground compared to the Honda, which means much like traditional SUVs, you have to climb inside the cabin of the Vitara Brezza. Now compare that to the WR-V where you tend to walk inside the cabin. The Vitara Brezza definitely delivers on the SUV experience. And once you're seated in this front seat, sitting nice and high, you get the full view of the bonnet, a commanding view of the road ahead. So definitely the Vitara Brezza does score high. The front seat themselves have really good cushioning and lateral support, and this particular car has got upholstery from Maruti's iCreate range, which does add a bit of premium flavor. Now unsurprisingly, since this is a Maruti, ergonomics are pretty much spot on. Everything falls to hand very easily, be it the touchscreen or the automatic climate control interface. And I'm particularly happy that the automatic climate control interface can be used on the move. There are physical buttons. Unlike the Honda that gets a touchpad, that can be slightly tricky to use when you're driving. You have to take your eyes off the road to use it. Issues, well, we've got two. First, the steering is adjustable only for tilt. There's no telescopic adjust. And second, the quality. Considering this car retails for almost exactly the same price as the Honda WR-V, that's roughly 10 lakhs ex showroom, you do expect a bit more in terms of quality, and that is where the Honda delivers. But what if you were to spend most of your time in the rear seat? Well, the Brezza's added width and height comes into play here, offering better shoulder room and headroom. If you want to fit 3 in the rear bench, it's the Brezza again that feels a tad more comfortable. The Maruti does offer more width and height for the rear seat occupants, but it's the Honda that gets more knee room at the rear. More than that, there's a great sense of space thanks to the really large windows, and not to mention you get that sunroof as well. But Honda seems to have thrown that advantage away by making the seats a bit too soft. Now obviously they will tend to get a bit uncomfortable over longer journeys, and as you can see, the headrests are not adjustable, so definitely that's a miss. Neither the WR-V or the Vitara Brezza gets a pair of rear AC vents, but you feel the need for it more in the Honda purely because the glass house is large, it lets in a lot of heat inside the cabin, and the front AC vents barely manage to cool the rear half of the cabin quickly. So as far as space on the inside is concerned, it is a bit of a mixed bag. But where the WR-V scores over the Brezza is in terms of boot space. The big 363-litre boot offers a lot more room compared to the Maruti's 328. Sadly, there are no magic seats on offer like you get in the Jazz, and surprisingly, there's no 60-40 split like the Brezza. In terms of infotainment, the WRV and the Brezza are closely stacked. Both get a large central touchscreen for the music, calls and navigation. Also, the WRV's DigiPad touchscreen doesn't offer a smooth user experience like the Brezza's Smart Play system that's quick to respond and, more importantly, easy to use on the go. So, the Brezza does look like it gets most things right. Or does it? Both cars are neck and neck on paper. The 1.3-litre engine on the Brezza makes 90 PS of power and 200 Nm of torque, whereas the WRV makes 100 PS and 200 Nm. In spite of the extra power, the Honda was a pinch slower compared to the Maruti in terms of outright acceleration from 0 to 100 km an hour. If there was one dampener in the Brezza experience, it would have to be the turbo lag. Now this 1.3-litre engine has done duty under a lot of Maruti bonnets, and it's had the same problem for a while now. Now to combat that, you really need to work the gearbox, make sure the engine is spinning in around 2000 RPM. And you won't really mind doing that because the gears, they're very good, they're very positive action, and they're sure slotting as well. Keep the motor spinning in the meat of its torque band and the Brezza rewards you. It's got the ability to plant a smile on your face once the going gets fast. The WRV masks turbo lag and the subsequent turbo surge much better than the Brezza. The 1.5-litre ID Tech motor is torquey, the torque delivery is linear, and most importantly predictable. That means you can amble about in one gear higher than you normally would. But the gear shift action itself, that's very clunky and it requires a bit more effort than you'd expect. Clunky or not, the ratios are well spaced in the WRV. For instance, if the revs drop, the Honda pulls clean, whereas you'd have to downshift in the Brezza. In our test, it was nearly a second and a half quicker from 40 to 100 in 4th gear. The extra 6th gear gives the WRV an edge on the highways. The engine feels a lot more relaxed compared to the Brezza. It is also a shade more efficient, returning 25.8 km to the litre compared to the Maruti's 25.3. On the flip side, the Brezza is a whole lot more frugal inside the city. There's a clear distinction in the way the suspension is set up on the Honda WRV and the Maruti Vitara Brezza. Evidently, the Honda is set up to be a lot softer. Upside, the low-speed ride is really good. Broken roads, potholes, not a problem. But the disadvantage, there are two. Once you reach speeds of about 80 kilometers an hour, you'll notice a bit of vertical bobbing, and this becomes very annoying out on the expressway, and it's amplified if you're sitting in the rear seat. Second, there's a lot of body roll when you chuck it into a corner. Lot of body roll which can get unnerving and which I think in fact will unsettle occupants over longer journeys. Now the firm suspension setup on the Vitara Brezza means that you'll thud through the potholes and the broken roads. The suspension is also quite audible, especially when you go over a lot of undulations in quick succession. The upside, well, take it out for a highway cruise, triple digit speeds, cabin remains rock steady and flat. In fact, even if you chuck it into a corner, the cabin remains nice and flat, and the steering, it's got the right amount of weight, right amount of feel, and it can be quite fun to drive. So if it is a driver's car that you're looking for, I think the Vitara Brezza wins that bet hands down. The Honda WRV does bring a dose of practicality to this segment with its generous cabin and boot space. The torquey 1.5 litre diesel engine is good fun to drive as well. So on paper, it does seem like the WRV is a worthy, practical alternative to the Vitara Brezza. But when you examine closely, you realize that Honda might have just thrown its advantages away. Bits like the soft seat and the soft suspension not only hamper comfort but also the car's stability. Then there are the little details like the missing rear headrest and the laggy infotainment screen that doesn't seem befitting of an experience that we've come to expect from a brand like Honda. Yes, the Vitara Brezza isn't as spacious as the Honda WRV, nor does it have the bigger boot, but it gets the basics right, and you can't really put a price tag on the feeling you get when you ride in that high seat of the Brezza. Dial in the fact that the Brezza looks like a proper SUV, gets a host of customization options, is more fuel efficient and more fun to drive. The Vitara Brezza remains the no-brainer choice in this segment.